Welcome to Directionally Correct, a People Next podcast with Cole and Scott. Today's guest, Kevin Oakes, CEO of i4cp.
Thanks to our sponsors, Lightcast. The world is full of talent data, but more data can lead to more questions, uncertainty, and stagnation as organizations sift through it to figure out what's fact from what's fiction. Lightcast talent intelligence platform answers your most difficult workforce questions to drive meaningful business results. With more than 20 years of experience as MC in burning glass, Lightcast accelerates your work, bringing together hundreds of billions of vetted, constantly updated data points and incredible insights to drive strategic talent decisions. Your organization can tap into the deepest open repository of skills, supply, and demand data in the world to transform your hunches into a skills-based future for your organization. Lightcast's flexible solution, used by 67 of the Fortune 100, can integrate your own data, be guided by in-house talent experts, and give you the tools and confidence to explore it for yourself. To learn more, book a demo at lightcast.io. All opinions are our own and do not reflect those of any other organization.
Scientific knowledge, and like in retrospect, it's all crystallized knowledge. Like you'd have to know exactly what the fuck I'm talking about to get this right. It's so unfair, so unfair to an applicant.
This is completely off topic, but so we went to this safari outside of Waco in a town called McGregor. It was actually a place where you could like take your kids to see like African animals, but they like live on this ranch. And during the daytime, you could hear like this little like whistling sound, like faintly all day. And the guides at the safari thing, they were like, well, that's actually SpaceX. That's where they test the engines at SpaceX.
That's
and
wild.
It's just over the hill over there. And then I was reading the news and they had like this huge fucking explosion. And they're like, in McGregor, Texas today, SpaceX rockets blow up. And I was like, oh, I wonder if the animals at the safari got killed. This is like right down the road.
Or just wildly freaked out. Like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
But you're bringing back like Waco memories and like my stint there. And at the airport, at the foot of the airport runway, guess what they had?
I don't know. What do they have?
A shotgun range. You could shoot your shotgun.
I mean, that's Waco. I'll give them credit. They've really redone their downtown.
Have they?
Oh, yeah. Like there's tons of restaurants and stuff to do down there now. And I'd always heard Waco was kind of a shithole, you know?
The downtown used to be, but well, think of that TV show, the Home Improvement, whatever it's called.
Yeah, but it's not just. I mean, we went to that area because we just want to see what it's about. My wife's a fan, but it's the whole area. It's like bled over, and there's tons of stuff down there now. I would say it's like very Austinized. There's a lot of like Austin type places down there.
I mean, they should. I mean, they should lean into being a college town, right?
Yeah, they should. For sure.
Not the place for the Branch Davidians. Like, fought the government, in 1993, 4, whatever that was.
It would be funny if that's the lot that SpaceX bought was the Branch Davidians. Anyway.
I'm sure there's nothing to see down there. No, yeah. That's fantastic. It's good for the city. It's good for the state to have more places to go. And
Jesus Christ, stop. Well, it's a neat place. I mean, I guess you could still call that hill country. I'm not sure if it actually fits that definition, but they have like wineries and stuff out there.
They have a killer zoo.
Okay, never been there.
Take the kiddos down there if you want to get away. They have, I've never been, but it's on the outskirts of town. One of these mega water slides, one of these things. It's like, I think it's called like the Big Flush or Big Splash or something like that. And like, 200 feet tall, and, it'll launch your ass into like this man-made lake. Right.
I've always wanted to do one of those. I've never done it. I mean, I always assumed that they weren't safe, but since it's Texas, it's just like allowed.
There's got to be broken bones left and right because it launches you in the air. It's not like a typical water slide at Wet and Wild that just kind of like glides you into a pool of water. No, it like throws you up in the air. Kevin, good to hear you. Good to see you.
Good to see you. How are you guys doing?
We were talking about big water slides before you joined, so I'm doing fantastic.
All right, good. I'm glad we got the important topics out of the way.
Oh, are you at home? Are you in Seattle?
I am, yes. I'm fresh off the Pearl Jam concert last night in Seattle, so
At Climate Pledge?
yeah, yep, that was great.
That's like a real homecoming, right? Like for like hometown boys make good.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they played 2 shows in Seattle, so the second one was last night. In fact, last night I think was live streamed around the world, but it was a great show.
It's a great venue. Did they hold up? Is it like obviously they're not like stage diving, probably, right? That'd be breaking news.
No, they definitely hold up. Yeah, they haven't lost a step really.
But you've been traveling a lot, right? You're rarely home anyway, right?
I don't know about rarely, but I've been traveling a lot the last few months. It's both Europe and Middle East, and then a lot just within the U.S. as well.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah.
Any places of note you want to mention?
I, believe it or not, just spoke at a leadership conference in the Maldives.
Really?
Okay. Now we're talking.
Right. So definitely a good trip. I flew through Dubai to get to the Maldives, and I was in Dubai when they had their historic flooding. I don't know if you read about that or saw anything on it, but
Oh, I did.
they had more rain in one day than they usually get in a year, and things do not drain well in Dubai. So the highways were closed and just kind of littered with cars, and everything was leaking, and it was kind of a crazy time.
That's awful.
Yeah.
So what do you wear to present at a conference in the Maldives? Is like cut off suit pants, something like that.
It's pretty normal business attire.
It's good to see you again. Obviously I've we presented PsyOp where you're like a master presenter to my terrible just get up there and trying to wing it style. But I saw you at i4cp event here in Seattle, and I was just absolutely blown away by this predictions report from 2024. Clearly, we're a better part of the way through 2024, but I'd love to. I think it'd be a great way to just talk about these various topics that are core to people analytics.
Yeah, great. Wherever you guys want to take the conversation is fine by me.
Yeah, I think like I've got the report pulled up in the background, but we can probably just hit on some of the high points. Obviously, we've talked a million times on here, and I'm sure you guys have as well, about AI. And it was no surprise to see that the number one prediction that you all had was high performance organizations will step up HR's involvement in AI strategy.
Mm-hmm.
What was kind of the thinking behind this, and what are some of the things that you're seeing in that space, Kevin?
So we published a report a little while ago, and the title of it was "Is HR already behind in the AI revolution?" And so I'll give away the ending. The answer was yes, that HR is already behind. And the hypothesis that we went into this report with was that in many organizations, they're leaving HR out of the strategic conversations when it comes to how are they going to leverage Gen AI in their business. And I think that's a huge mistake because obviously one of the places Gen AI has the most impact is with the workforce. And the function that has the most expertise on the workforce is HR. Yet what we're finding in many organizations is that HR is not involved in the strategic or the governance discussions around AI in the organization. And we really think it's time that organizations include HR, but HR has also got to prove that it's worthy of being in that conversation. So part of the study was also looking at what are people's confidence in HR's ability to, be an AI expert. And the confidence level is pretty low. So I think the call to action here is that HR's got to step up their use of AI They've got to get creative. They've got to prove their mettle, and be a contributor in Gen AI. But more importantly, get their voice heard in the conversations that are happening, throughout the organization.
People don't really think about HR functions as being particularly techy in this sort of respect, right? Like we got to rely on different arms of the organization to get AI up and running. Like
Right.
what kind of applications are best suited for HR to get into for Gen AI or AI in general, really?
Yeah, it's interesting, Scott. You don't have to be techie to do well in AI. They've called it the revenge of the liberal arts major, right? And I think this is where HR can really shine. There's a number of different areas where HR is using AI. So the biggest ones are talent acquisition, learning and development, and people analytics. Those are the three tops according
Mhm.
to our research. But I think if HR can showcase from a workforce planning perspective, how are they thinking about Gen AI long term? How's it going to impact productivity amongst the workforce? Those are topics that are going to get the CEO, CFO, COO's attention for sure.
I think there's a lot of applications that AI needs to do something for the organization, do something for the individual people, really. And I think like workforce planning is one of those where if you can automate, say, like job analysis, and then like say, here's the sort of structure that we need, and like here's sort of the cascading goals down the organization. I mean, that saves a ton of time, meetings, planning,
For
all
sure.
this sort of stuff that would really get people on board and actually focus back on work, get a lot of traction.
Yeah, I agree. And, one of the things that we're doing right now is trying to gather interesting use cases of AI in HR. And so
Yeah.
we're asking our peer network to tell us how are they using AI that's creative, that they haven't really seen others leverage, so that we can, get some new ideas, into the heads of some of the people that we work with.
What do they say? Like, I don't know if you're able to even relay this information. Like, what are they saying? Like, what are some of the cool ideas?
Well, we had one that I thought was a great use of AI, and it doesn't really. It's not just for the HR function. So we had a gentleman who was tasked with coming up with the governance policy for AI in his organization. So he gave that to ChatGPT, and
Yeah.
he created the governance policy through ChatGPT, gave it to his senior counsel, who looked at it and said, "This is great. It's perfect. I really don't have any changes to it." So we took all the prompts that this guy used, and he let us publish them so that anybody could do this. If you need to create a governance policy for AI in your company, just there's 8 prompts that you can go through, and you'll be able to create one pretty quickly. So it's fun, things like that people might not think of, that we're just trying to document and give them the prompts. This isn't incredibly secret IP here. Let's give them the prompts to use.
You let AI choose its own governance policy for
Exactly.
AI,
That's right.
right?
Please govern us, all AI.
We welcome the robot overlords,
That's right.
definitely.
Well, I think that was I think that was a good hit on the first big kind of prediction and priority for this year. I don't want to go through all of them, but the third one was culture measures are both quantitative and qualitative are now expected. And I know, Kevin, in preparing for this podcast, I know you'd actually written a book about the cultural renovation as well, and so I know this is kind of a sweet spot for you as well. Can you talk to us about what makes culture relevant right now and how to measure it effectively?
Yeah, thanks, Cole. It is a sweet spot for us and a topic I love talking about. It's very clear that high performing organizations have healthy cultures, and performance of an organization is really an outcome of having a healthy culture. It doesn't mean that there aren't companies out there that perform well in the market but have horrible cultures, but that's like 0.01% of companies, and that's the hard way to do it. And when I talk to CEOs, they inherently understand the importance of a healthy culture. Um, but most of them that I talked to had no idea how to change culture.
Mhm.
So culture renovation was all about how do you change your culture if you don't like where it is right now, or if you want a culture that's future proof and ready for what's next. So we did one of the largest culture studies that I'm aware of. We had over 7,000 respondents to the study, and we looked at culture change specifically. And it was fueled by one statistic that 15% of companies that set out to change their culture actually succeed. That means most companies who try to change their culture fail, and many fail horribly. But we wanted to look at that 15% and find out, is there a blueprint that we could call from those 15%? Are there things that they're doing in common that we could share with others? And we came up with 18 action steps. They're almost sequential that organizations can take in order to change culture. And the book was really written for the CEO and the leadership team and the CHRO to think through, how do I want to change the culture of the organization? And it's peppered with lots of great examples from companies like Microsoft or 3M or MasterCard or T-Mobile, companies that have done a great job at changing their culture. And as we've gone through this and published the book, it's been really rewarding to see how many companies are now using it as the blueprint to affect culture change. I've even had divisions of the military call us up and say, "Hey, you might be surprised by this, but we're using your book to change our division of the military." I'm not going to give away the divisions, but I was shocked by that because it wasn't written for the military. It was really corporate stories. So it's been a labor of love. We've been working with a number of CEOs and their senior teams, and they're following the steps in the book. When we first started out, though, we were calling this culture transformation, and as we got into it, we realized nobody is transforming their culture. They're not becoming something completely different. The successful ones are carefully renovating their culture, keeping what made them good to begin with, and what's hard to replace, what's unique about them, like you would an old house if you were renovating an old house, in order to improve the value. And so renovation became a much more approachable term to use, and it's one I've heard from countless people that they just really resonate with. So that the culture renovation has been a real fun project. Now, your question, Cole, was specifically about measurement. Measurement is one of the steps of those 18. And we took a cue from the National Association of Corporate Directors, the NACD, which many board directors around the country belong to. It's an association. And they put out a report a little while ago called Culture as a Corporate Asset. And in that report, they told board directors that they should be measuring culture and looking for those measures, both quantitative and qualitative, on a regular basis. And so we're starting to see that. We're starting to see more and more boards ask for those culture measures, particularly as we've had more and more scandals or problems in organizations. The original Boeing 737 MAX tragedies were ultimately blamed by the U.S. House of Representatives on a culture of concealment inside the organization, meaning that there wasn't psychological safety to share what engineers were seeing as problems with those planes, with senior leaders. And that culture still exists today. I think the door falling off a few months ago of the Alaska plane was an example of that. We've seen it at Wells Fargo, where they're still reeling from the sales fiasco, where they had this incentive culture, and salespeople were fraudulently opening and closing accounts in order to earn incentives. The boards of those companies didn't have any clue that existed, or that those cultures existed, but then they have to deal with the problems afterwards. And so more and more boards want to get ahead of this, and they want to understand what are some of the cultural underpinnings of the companies we govern. What are some of the issues we should be on the lookout for? And so that's why I think measurement of culture is going to become a much bigger thing going forward.
More on that later, but I mean, like, culture is inherently a social process, right? Like, I behave one way, I kind of infect you, and anything can be passed through people, right? Anything can become contagious, both good and bad. There's a lot of like debate whether this is like kind of a top down process, like you used to talk about the military, like we're gonna, or the CEOs, like we're gonna change the culture from down, or if it's a bottom up process. You really need like a core group of influential underlings to actually change the culture and those people around them.
It's very clear, Scott, that it's both, and we talk
Mhm.
about that in the book. So
Or it depends on the organization in
yeah,
general.
yeah, it's very hard to change culture if the leadership doesn't want to, right? Or if they're not on board. So
Yeah.
you have to have leadership cooperation, and it has to be leader led if you want to change culture. But you need a co-creation mentality throughout the workforce. And so there are techniques that smart companies have used, Microsoft being one of the best ones, to create the that co-creation mentality, and also create a committee of culture champions throughout the organization. And we describe in the book using organizational network analysis and other techniques to uncover those influencers and energizers that exist in any workforce, and make sure they're part of your culture cabinet. And how are they going to support the culture initiative overall? So culture is partly social cues, but it's much broader than that. And what we're finding is that the companies that are proactive about it, they are creating very, very healthy cultures, which ultimately is improving the bottom line business impact of the organization.
Oh, cool. He's talking network analysis to me. Talk nerdy to me, Kevin.
I,
We're not even to the nerdery yet.
honestly, I think network analysis is one of the most underutilized techniques in organizations. I really feel like more companies need to use O&A in their workforce because it's not that complex. It doesn't take a whole lot of time, but it can be very powerful.
It's yeah. It's one of those things where it's like you can wade in and like there's a way to get like very quick insights through network analytics and just like through giving surveys, and then there's like a deeper into the pool too, right? Where you can go
Right.
much deeper into it, which I think kind of like people are scared away by that first 20%, right? Like, oh gosh,
Mhm.
now we're gonna have to do this, and I've got to fight through employees not understanding what this survey is because it looks totally different from other surveys and this sort of thing. But
Right.
then finding some like it really doesn't take that much to get some like minor expertise and like basic statistics and network analytics.
That's right.
Oh, for sure. I'm curious how you would react to this, Kevin. I know a while back we had Sue Lamb on the podcast from Coca Cola, and we talked about culture, and I introduced kind of my three pillars of how I think about culture is culture as symbols, culture as what you like, who can get away with things, and what can you get away with,
Yep.
and then culture as what's rewarded and punished behind the scenes. And so I'm thinking
Hmm.
about a lot of times, in my opinion, one of the reasons why culture transformations or culture renovations don't happen is because the people who actually try to renovate or transform, those are the ones who are punished behind the scenes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the culture kind of organ rejects what's going on. How do you get around that? And is it things like the cultural champions and the O&A, or are there other techniques that are outlined?
Yeah, no, those concepts are all in the book, Cole, and they're part of the 18 action steps. What we find is healthy cultures, they don't let brilliant jerks exist in the organization.
Hmm.
When you have people who are detrimental to the culture, no matter how good they are at executing, if they're the best salesperson, if they're the best engineer, the best coder, whatever it might be, if they're leaving a path of destruction in their wake in the culture, then that person has to go or they have to change.
Yeah.
And there's countless examples where very healthy cultures do that. They don't let those brilliant jerks exist. Equally, there's a lot of effort in those healthy cultures to reward leaders for people outcomes. Too often we focus on the business outcomes, but we don't focus on how well are you retaining people in your team? How well are you attracting people in your team? Are they getting promoted? Are you moving them around? Are you developing those people? The healthier cultures are holding leaders accountable for that. And then lastly, they're very clear on what leadership behaviors they expect, and they train leaders on the behaviors. It's night and day between poor cultures and healthy cultures. the amount of training they give to leaders on behaviors that they want them to emulate. Because people are going to do what leaders do, right? They're not going to do what's written in a PowerPoint or what's framed on a wall. They're going to do what those leaders do. So it's important to constantly train leaders on those behaviors. And if those leaders aren't walking the talk, then you need to swap them out. And I've had many examples in the book of where companies did that.
Go figure. You tell employees what to do, i.e., you tell the managers what you expect out of them and what sort of behaviors are going to be rewarded and acceptable, and then they go and do it, right? As opposed to just leaving it up to chance and letting
Right.
them,
Exactly.
run their own ship, as it were.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. When I think about, also wanted to pull up one other thing that you had shared with us in the 2024 predictions report, Kevin. Oh, here it is.
Yep.
So you guys put the 2024 people analytics leader priorities, and so you had four things that folks who are leading people analytics are thinking about this year. The first was automating delivery of data analytics, upskilling HR and data acumen, enabling AI to connect data across the business, and then applying predictive modeling and generative AI to things like workforce planning. We're a little bit into the year now. Which of these do you think is aging the best? Right? Which of these is remaining the top priority in people analytics from what you've seen? And Scott, I'd love for you to weigh in here too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know for certain which one is coming to the top. These, now keep in mind, these are priorities that our people analytics board gave to us. So we run different groups of functions. We have a CHRO board. We have one for heads of diversity, heads of learning and talent, heads of talent acquisition, et cetera. And so we have a group of people analytics leaders. And we call from these groups, what are your priorities for the coming year? And these were the ones that bubbled to the top for those analytic leaders. And so I think they're all very interesting, frankly. I think the number two kind of goes back to how we started this, upskilling HR and data acumen, especially related to productivity and culture drivers. Hopefully that's happening in organizations, and hopefully we're upskilling HR in Gen AI overall. But I think each one of these, has merit. And I'd love to hear what you guys think about, which ones you resonate mostly with you.
I think it's organization specific, right? Like some organizations are ahead in some areas and some are, behind in some areas, but we're all kind of like doing about the same. I would, if I had to lean towards one, I'd say automation. This kind of goes hand in hand with Gen AI or just AI in general. Just being able to take some tasks that are time consuming, boring, not non-cognitive sort of task, and turn those over to computers so that more cerebral sort of things can take place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm kind of of the same mind. If you just took out the words AI in here, these would be pretty darn similar to
Yeah.
prior years priorities in
Yep.
terms of what's going on. Predictive modeling, connecting data across the business, upskilling HR. Those are like the greatest hits. One of the things that I see though is HR teams right now are focusing a ton on automation, and I think it's because of this pressing need for kind of doing more with less.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you can do more with less is if you're focusing on automating, especially some of the low value added kind of things that HR functions have to do, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think people analytics is spending a lot of cycles in that area right now for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I said at the beginning that talent acquisition was one area where they've really embraced AI, but I think it's along those lines, Cole. What we're seeing in several organizations is they've been able to use Gen AI to go out and find passive candidates, or interesting looking candidates out there way faster and much more efficient than the human people that we used to have doing this. So that's one area where we've seen some efficiency gains by using Gen AI overall.
One thing that came up in the event that you had here in Seattle that really like resonated with me, and I haven't heard anyone else talking about it, is these micro pressures may lead to divisiveness in organizations. I believe you said that there's a record number of presidential elections going on this year, and we all know what 2020 was like, and it could really stir up the workforce if we're not prepared for it.
Well, it's already starting to come to a head, of course. So
Yeah.
with the guilty verdict of former President Trump, I think my caution to CHROs and HR in general is make sure that you're prepared for divisiveness in the workforce. And I've written a couple articles recently about this. You can't. It's a fool's errand to try to tell the workforce don't talk about politics at work. It's just not going to happen. Even though there are companies that have done that, they've said we don't want you to talk about
Hmm.
politics at work. You can't prevent people from having conversations. What you can do, though, is teach people how to have respectful conversations. And so I'm trying to advise HR leaders to say, look, the more people can listen to understand as opposed to listen to reply, the more you're going to have constructive dialogue throughout the organization. And as you said, Scott, this is the year of elections. There's a huge election happening in India right now, for example, and over the next 6 weeks that could easily divide the workforce. We've all seen how the Israel-Hamas war
Hmm.
has divided
Hmm.
workforces. I've had companies tell me they had to shut down their internal social channels because there was too much hate speech, and too much vitriol on those social channels, right?
Oh
And
God.
it's rough because HR is often called in to be the referee or the arbiter, in these conversations. They're also supposed to police, what's happening, and that's really not the job of HR. But there's really nobody else organizations can turn to step in. And so, as we get towards the U.S. presidential election, I just expect this to be increasingly, a challenging time for workforces. And I want HR to be prepared, not just up to the election, but after the election as well. Because no matter which way it goes, it's still going to be, pretty hectic after the election, as we saw 4 years ago.
Yeah, I was talking to a person the other day about planning a people analytics meetup later this year. We were looking at like late October, and they're like, well, maybe we could do like October 23rd. And then we're like, well, if we move into November, maybe we could target November 6th. And we're like, well, I don't know. Maybe the Civil War will be beginning that day. So maybe we'll skip that day for hosting the people analytics meetup. I don't know.
That's
There's a
right.
question of like how much authenticity do you want people to bring to the office as well? Like we want people be your authentic self. It's like maybe maybe not. Maybe put down the marching through the office with whatever political orientation you
I've,
have.
I've joked with so many CHROs about that. Bring your whole self to work, unless we don't like you.
Yeah.
Unless we don't like your whole self, then leave the part we don't like at home. Yeah, it's
We're
challenging.
gonna have to deculture you out of this organization. Clearly.
That's right.
Well, and speaking of things we shouldn't like, why shouldn't I like relish, Kevin? This is in preparing for this podcast. That was the thing that intrigued me the most, and I told you, I wanted to wait to talk to you about it. So why shouldn't I like relish?
All right.
Cole's been talking about this, by the way.
Like,
He's
like
really
a
interested.
lot.
Well, I'm going to apologize upfront to you, and I'm going to apologize to all the relish lovers who might be listening, because I probably will ruin relish for you. So I used to work at a pickle factory when I was in high school and college, and yes, those do exist. And I normally would work outside of the factory when farmers would bring in their cucumbers, to be made into pickles. And I worked on this big machine that kind of sorted those cucumbers by small, like the little gherkin pickles, all the way up to, big bloated cucumbers. And it's those big bloated cucumbers, and then sort of the misshapen ones, and the ones that are, maybe half rotten. Those are the ones that go inside to be made into relish. Now, I worked at the beginning of the season every year on the relish line because the farmers weren't ready to come into the factory just yet. And so I spent a couple weeks on the relish line. And my job on the relish line was to pick out things that don't belong on the relish line to go into the big churn, the big blades that, churn it all up and
Yeah, yeah.
make it into relish. And I was horrible at this job. I'm just going to tell you right up front. So I'd be picking out pieces of wood and, other things, and I'd just watch this go by and like, oh, I missed that bug. Oh shoot, there goes another a branch. Oh well. all that stuff just goes into relish. So there are bugs in there. There are branches and leaves. It just you have no idea what goes into relish. So I never ate relish after I worked the relish line.
I'm glad the statute of limitations is off. Oh man.
Hopefully AI. They've incorporated some sort of AI to knock these sort of things out
Yes,
by
let's
now.
hope. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you want to do some confusion matrix, Scott?
Let's do some confusion matrix.
The confusion matrix.
All right, Kevin. This is pretty simple. We got 5 questions for you, loosely based on the Big Five personality assessment. And if Cole likes your answer, he will make you a social media tile to share with everybody.
Okay.
Are you ready? These are random. I'm not gonna lie.
I don't know what I'm getting into right here. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it.
Well, we'll start you off easy. What is the most unique piece of art or decor in your house?
Oh, I'm looking at it right now. I used to run a company called Click to Learn years and years ago. It was the first company Paul Allen founded after Microsoft, and we had IPO'd the company, and we were a true and true .com company, and we went through the .com downfall. So we eventually took .com out of our name, but we had a huge neon sign that said clicktolearn.com in our offices. And when we closed down those offices, we ended up, changing the name of the company because we merged it with another company. I took the sign. And so I've got this huge clicktolearn.com sign, it's right on the wall next to me right now.
It's off camera, but like, how big we talking? We talking like the size of a billboard? It's like 3x5?
No. It's like about 4 or 5 feet long or so. But I've got all the little LED lights, hooked up to it. I had an electrician come in and do all that. So, yeah, that's probably the most unique.
What about you, Cole? Like, I've been to your house, but I don't recall anything like super distinctive.
Yeah, it's probably the kukri I have on the mantle, which is a big knife, which was a wedding gift. So my wife is South Asian, and that was a part of the wedding is that they give you this big knife, and so it's like, okay, this is cool. I don't know. What about you, Scott?
That's a good. Oh, me? Well, as you know, I've been working on my Harry Potter painting thing. So I've had various family members and friends. I've been meaning to talk to you, Cole. You, Kevin, too. Why not? Send me landscape videos of themselves for about 4 minutes, and I have it on loop. Cole was very nice to give me a monitor last time I was in town, and that's what I have right now. I'll show you next time.
Okay.
It's a little art project.
I am waiting for you to reveal that because you talked about it, I think, in our New Year's resolution episode,
It's
which
it's
was
it's well in works, and I kind of put it down for a while, but I need participants. So anyone out there wants to send me a video of themselves for like 4 minutes, just sitting there doing nothing, by all means. But Kevin, you are CEO. You got a lot of stuff going on. Do you have any productivity hacks or organizational hacks that get you through the day?
Yeah, that's a good point. I just work and play in tandem. So I never loved the word work-life balance because that always
Yeah,
indicated that one thing is bad and one thing is good and one thing should end and another thing should start. I always liked the idea of work-life blend. And so if I go on vacation, I still do a little bit of work when I'm on vacation because I know what's waiting for me when I'm, when I get back, after vacation. If it's the work day, like later, it's a Friday right now. I'm kicking off early. I'm going to go golf with some friends. It's to me, you really have to blend things these days.
yeah.
And for me, that's how my most productive is. I just it just all blends together for me.
I mean, like I didn't see an invite to play golf in my inbox, Kevin. So
Anytime you want, let's get out there.
you don't want to play with me. Like it would take 7 hours. Clearly, you meet a lot of people in large gatherings. i4cp has great events all over the place.
Mhm.
How do you handle meeting new people? Do you have like a strategy or like a modus operandi?
Um, For me, it's just I always really just want to listen to them. I want to ask a
Mhm.
question of them and get them telling me a bit about their life, what they do, what's interesting to them. I just love sitting and listening to new people and trying to understand what makes them tick. I think I always think that's better than immediately talking and trying to get everybody to know you right
Yeah.
off the bat. Um, I met an HR executive from a big company just 2 days ago who was wonderful and just told me so many fantastic stories about their life, about their work, and that's what I thrive on. That's why I do what I do, because I just love meeting these new people.
People's favorite topic is themselves, right?
That's right. Yep. It doesn't take much to get people talking about
It's like, "Oh, I asked that guy about himself, and, like, I'm super likable now," right? Just talking about this.
stuff.
Do you have a cause or issue that you're passionate about? I know you do volunteer work.
Yeah, we for years we've been supporting an organization called Best Buddies.
Best
It was
buddies.
started by Anthony Kennedy Shriver like 35 years ago, I think, when he was at Georgetown. And it's an organization that benefits individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So a lot of Down syndrome, but a wide variety of folks with IDD. And my head of sales, who's been with us over a decade, has a son with Down syndrome. So she was the one who introduced us to Best Buddies to begin with. And so every year at our conference, we have Best Buddies come in and present to the conference. We've been big supporters of their jobs program because people with IDD generally have an 85%, 90% unemployment rate. But they can be wonderful workers. And, we've been helping to place people with IDD in organizations around the country. And we ourselves employ someone with IDD. And many of our employees are sitting on state boards for Best Buddies. There wasn't a chapter in the state of Washington. So I started one with a lot of help from others about 5, 7 years ago, and that's been going great. And we do a lot of things with our local chapter, but nationally we're pretty active with Best Buddies as well.
It's super admirable. Everyone should look them up. Finally, what is a small everyday thing that brings you joy?
Say it again.
A small everyday thing that brings you joy.
Small everyday thing that brings me joy. Other than just having my coffee in the morning,
That's good enough. A
I
lot of
love
days,
love a
right?
good cup of coffee. I'm big into music, so when I get a chance, I will just put on a different artist around the house, and I'm too often on Zoom calls and and phone calls that I can't do that. But when I do have a chance, I can just play some music.
So just a moment to yourself, really, is what it sounds like.
It is, yeah. That's right.
What about you, Cole? Like, I want to maximize Cole's joy in life. He needs it.
Oh, I would say it's definitely like something like a small like sugary sweet
Oh
that
yeah.
nobody gets to see, like a fruit snack. You ever had fruit snacks or from like Welch's? They might be my favorite thing on earth. Right? They're like for children, but I love them.
Geared towards 5 to 7 year olds, but
Yeah, and if I can sneak a fruit snack here or there, oh man, that might be the best day of my life.
There's something about doing something somewhat naughty, right? Like they're for your kids, but like you're gonna take them, right? Or
that's funny.
Absolutely.
Oh, I have another one for you, Scott.
oh yeah,
I have a dartboard set up, so I will often just throw darts while I'm on a conference call or something. So that definitely brings me
Yeah.
joy, just throwing darts.
that's a
Well,
power move. I like that. I like that.
absolutely. Well, let's do some nerdery real quick. The nerdery. Because I think related to your first answer about music, Kevin, we had an article about music exploration. Let me find the article real quick. But do you want to tee us up, Scott?
So the article focuses on the manifestation of cultural taste, specifically what shapes people's changing cultural taste in the consumption habits of music.
Hmm.
Um, in the previous studies have suggested that personal factors such as traits or moods influence how people consume music or how they find new music, or also macro influences like immigration. And you may be asking like why I would bring this up, because I think it has like strong cultural elements here. So what they did is they analyzed 100 million music streams by listeners in Europe, Brazil, Australia, South Africa. So you're talking like Spotify sort of consumption here. And they measured disruptions in people's normal listening habits due to travel and COVID lockdowns. But the really cool thing is here is how they measured culture. So they measured the lexical similarity between like what you would normally listen to individually, the same patterns within, say, a dominant country. So, what are the mainstream sort of musical tastes for the country, as well as for like globally? Like, what do people listen to around the world? And what they found is when people traveled, there's greater variation in musical listening. But people explored more different and more distinct sort of music when they traveled to countries that are more distinct from their own.
Hmm.
So, for instance, England and Australia are very far geographically apart, but they're very close similarity and as far as culturally.
Yeah.
But say Brazil is much closer geographically to England, but much more distinct culturally. And
Right.
what they found is that when people traveled from England to Brazil, they tended to pick up more different forms of music and it became stickier. So they listened to it longer and more plays over time. COVID lockdowns also promoted a greater exploration in sort of musical taste. So you can either have people travel a lot and they will pick up greater variations of music, or essentially put them in a box, right? But I thought this like actual measure of cultural variation is super critical and like super awesome way to do it. We don't really talk about how to measure culture in this sort of way.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I haven't really thought about it. Obviously England and Australia are part of the kingdom, and you know,
Mhm.
so it doesn't. It's not surprising they have the same taste. Some of this all goes back to when Spain and Portugal in the 1500s decided to divide the earth in half, and Spain got the top half of the earth, and Portugal got the bottom half of the earth, and they went off and tried to conquer distant lands. But that's why Portuguese is the language in Brazil right now, right? And so that's why you have all that, the Portuguese influence. But I love when I travel. I love hearing music from that culture. I almost don't want to listen to the
Mhm.
normal stuff I listen to because I feel like it gets you more in the in the spirit of that country that you're in, or of the region that you're in. So, but I think that's really fascinating, Scott, what you just read.
Absolutely. I mean, this is one of the things I appreciate about you, Scott, is you have a lot of creativity and kind of divergent thinking when it comes to how to bring new ideas and apply them in the context of people analytics. And so I love the thought of being able to kind of measure the stickiness factor of cultural interactions. And then I think about, from the O&A lens, how would you go about doing that? Like how would you actually like operationalize this in
Yeah.
a way that wouldn't be creepy too, but it would also be value add to the employees themselves. I don't know. This could be a fascinating exploration.
It does explain like if we have like a pocket of culture here and we want it to change, how can we do it? Like if you send it to like a different department next door that is very similar to your own, the likelihood that you're going to change is not great, right? You really need these sort of like unique experiences, unique sort of distant places to bring in new ideas that will be more unique and more likely to stick, evidently, right? And so that may mean geographically sending people to different areas to learn different sort of even cultural practices that they can apply back at their own home,
Yeah.
as it were, um, because like not everything is going to be as sticky.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of mobility in workforces and moving talent around the company,
Yeah.
around the organization. And, sometimes that means a geographic movement, and moving people, into new cultures. And I think that can be really good developmentally for the people, but it's also good for the organization because you improve collaboration and communication and you kind of break down silos. But our latest culture study that we're just putting out now, and it's going out to a very global audience. We originally designed it for Southeast Asia, but that now we expanded it to many other regions. We're asking a couple questions of what is more prominent where you work? Is it your local culture or your regional culture, or is it the
Hmm.
company culture, right? And this is a question that we get into all the time. Which one should be more prominent? And usually the answer is organizational culture at the workplace. But how accepting is that culture of your local
Yeah.
tradition, your local habits, mores, etc. So I think that's kind of an interesting area, and we're starting to focus on that.
If you look at, like, say, the Hofstede dimensions, it breaks down into, say, like, individualistic cultures, collectivistic cultures. I think there's like 6 different dimensions here. And I think this, along with, say, like, LLMs, provides a really unique way to measure subcultures. So,
Yeah,
like, maybe you had like documents or something like that. Like, how do people talk about the culture within the team? How they talk about it within the unit? How do we talk about it globally? And then you start getting measures of subcultures and like how different organizations or sub organizations operate, and it becomes like really fascinating. So I mean, like you had mentioned just being able to measure culture previously, with your book Cultural Renovation.
right.
This is another method, and we're just seeing the technology come, right? And it's just like another piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, you guys want to talk about getting paid $75,000 a year?
And let's do it.
All right. So there was an article that came out in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2021 by Wharton's Matt Killingsworth, but Neil Morelli made a LinkedIn post about it, and he put out some really good stuff. And it was about the famous finding that once people get to making roughly $75,000 a year, that their well being plateaus. But what they looked at in this study was actually the fact that all of those studies that had been conducted previously were asking people after the fact about their well-being. They weren't actually measuring it in real time, and so there's I'm not going to get too much in the details about the different ways that they measured well-being here, because I think there's evaluative and then experience based. But what they did is if you measure well-being in real time, there's actually a linear relationship between your as your income goes up and the Z score of your well-being, whether it's experienced
Hmm.
or your life satisfaction. And it doesn't matter at the $75,000 cutoff. And so I guess the finding is here, if you measure in real time, well-being does go up even as you make more money. And it's not necessarily that relationship of diminishing returns that's been described before. And so I thought this was an interesting finding, and I'll just say, from having been a while since I made $75,000, it does strike true in my own life. I feel like so making a little bit more money does help. I don't know. How do you guys react to this?
I think if you can take away the worry of money, that's going
Yeah.
to affect your well-being, right? So the more that you're feeling comfortable and not worrying about paycheck to paycheck or past debts or bills or something, I think you're going to affect well-being just from that alone, in my opinion.
Yeah, just being able to go to the restaurant and order what you want without like having to really like scour the menu and like count your
Yeah.
dollars on the train or what have you, to reference who's it, Royals.
Yeah. Money's like your freedom quotient, right? It just
It
allows
is.
you ability to do more stuff. It's like, hey, maybe I will have that more expensive coffee today. Not as big a deal. And it's the little things in life, like Kevin described earlier. But
They also talk about like the previous study had done this in a dichotomous fashion. This is more continuous
mhm.
scale. So obviously you got like artificial cutoffs in the previous sort of analysis, and organizations had used this as an excuse to not pay people more. It's like, well, you got 75,000, so you're clearly all right.
Well, and I think what this is, I mean, we've seen companies come out. I can't remember the name of it, but there was this one very famous company that paid everybody at the company $75,000 just because of the research that had shown. Beyond that, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And and I think it's just really important that when you get these highly publicized, highly sticky scientific findings, that you try to replicate them, that you try to make sure that the way that it was operationally measured is, still relevant. And so I think it's definitely well worth revisiting some of these findings for sure.
Yeah, the company you're referencing is Gravity Payments, Cole. They're actually local
Yeah.
to Scott and I, and Dan Price is the CEO. He's somebody I actually know. They've gone through some tough times just with Dan personally, but yeah, I think there's a lot of merit to what he started there. And I think a lot of companies would do well to kind of follow what the precedent he set around paying everybody a minimum of 75K, whatever it was. And he's been progressive in some other comp areas too of the company. And so hopefully more and more startups and entrepreneurial organizations will look at the comp practices that some of those companies have put into place.
I'd like to know what they mean by well-being as well. Like so much of your pay and like your feelings of your pay are like social comparisons, right? Like I get paid this, and all my coworkers get paid, less or more, what have you. And as Cole likes to say, like everyone gets paid the same in the end, right?
Oh gosh, we're not going there, are we? This is an article. This is an article I wrote like 2 years ago. A fun fact, I told Scott this the other day, but there was a guy who literally drove like 4 hours to come meet up, and I was like, okay, that's cool. And then I realized, like after talking to him for 30 minutes, all he wanted to do was debate about this. Everyone gets paid the same article. I was like, you drove 4 hours just to debate with me about something. I don't know. I thought that was funny.
What was his
But
argument? Something like people get paid 75,000. Some people get paid 80,000. Those are different.
oh gosh, I'm not even gonna get into it. Anyway, let's do the last. Let's
The
do the
last
last
one?
nerdery article.
All right, let's see. Entrepreneur weirdness is a double-edged sword, effects on product creativity and investor attraction. So entrepreneurs are often considered quirky. Think about your Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, or Warren Buffett. They're sort of like oddballs. And weirdness is defined as a failure to adhere to social norms. So, different speech or appearance or behaviors. And this can be a good or bad thing. So, like on one hand, you could be more creative. On the other hand, you could have a lack of person or business acumen to actually thrive as an entrepreneur. So what they did is they used pitches from the TV show Shark Tank. We're all familiar with Shark Tank, right? That you go up there and like try and get the sharks to invest in you. And they had 3 rater samples, each measure a different aspect independently. So weirdness of the person pitching, the entrepreneur, the creativity of the product, and the something else, product competence or something like that. But this is all blind, so they didn't know what the actual hypotheses were when they were doing. They used a CFA, confirmatory factor analysis, to test this relationship. And the findings is that weirdness can be both an advantage in product creativity and a liability, so lower competence. And these findings, these effects influence the product creativity and the ultimate decision for funding. But warmth can mitigate these effects. So if you're going to be weird, at least be personable and have some sort of EI involved to mitigate your weirdness.
It's funny.
Well, and Kevin, you've been an entrepreneur. It sounds like a few times. Do you think there's any kind of correlation between how weird an entrepreneur is and how successful they are, or how competent they are?
I do not. So I've heard many times, we have this sort of notion of what an entrepreneur is, but in reality, the people that are getting the funding and having the most success are people in their 40s and 50s who are entrepreneurs and starting up companies for the first time.
Mm.
It's not the Bill Gateses of the world, dropping out of college and starting a company. Those are the ones that get a lot of press. I have sort of a love-hate relationship with Shark Tank. I've watched it many times. I used to watch it with my son, and I love the fact that it taught everybody what equity is. I think a lot of people didn't really understand equity beforehand, and it taught them how the fundraising game is played to an extent. and I have a hate relationship because that is not real life. That's not the way fundraising actually happens, like they do on Shark Tank. And it's it's a made for TV. The focus is on entertainment, more than anything. And so
Mm-hmm.
you do get a lot of characters on that show. They don't want boring people coming on that show, right? So they're selecting, interesting characters and interesting products. But in real life, the fundraising game is played a lot differently than what you see on Shark Tank. I love that my son, when he was like 10 years old or something, he'd be telling me, "Dad, that's a bad deal. He shouldn't take it," or "Oh, that's a good deal. He should take it, Dad." So it's just funny to see young people get into the groove of it and realize what's giving up too much equity and what's too little.
Definitely learn that some people roll in there and be like, I will give you 2% of my company for $5 million. Like, you haven't
Right,
sold a single product yet. What do you?
right.
Where'd you come up with these figures?
Yeah. All right. Everybody's got, your company is never more valuable than when you don't have any revenue because it's just, whatever you imagine it will be.
I think about people that are like wildly intelligent or just like way out there on the spectrum, and they can be wildly creative but also not be able to relate to people. That's kind of what I thought about here, and I guess it does take like a sort of an oddball to go out on your own and try to make a company succeed.
That's only half the battle, creating a product or creating, something unique. It's
Yeah.
running a company too, right? So you have to understand finance, you have to understand marketing, you have to understand sales, and that's where a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, fall down because they're just not versatile enough to, really understand all components of a successful organization.
This is what I say about restaurants too. It's like having great food is like 10% of the battle. The
That's
rest
right.
is all like the sort of IO stuff, like, managing people, making sure you have a great culture, making sure you do the payroll correctly, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rest is just making sure you have a celebrity chef, and then you'll make all the money. Well, this has been a lot of fun, Kevin, and I wanted to give a quick shout out to just i4cp and all the great work that you guys do, not just to support people analytics, but the entire kind of HR and business community. And wanted to give a quick shout out. I know you guys have a series of webinars about next practices. I'll put a link in the show notes to anybody who wants to attend those in the future. But Scott, any final words for Kevin before we wrap up?
Kevin, it's great to see you again. Good luck on the golf today. How can people get in touch with you if they want to reach out?
Oh, I'm easy to find, but Kevin.oaks at i4cp is my email. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter. You can find me pretty easy.
Fantastic. Well, you've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with Cole and Scott, and today's guest, Kevin Oaks. Thanks for joining us, Kevin.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Had a lot of fun.
Directionally Correct is dedicated to you, our listeners, to help educate and entertain you on how to effectively do people analytics. By supporting this podcast, you are helping us continue to provide valuable insights and knowledge to our listeners. Please consider becoming a patron of the podcast. You can find the link to sign up in the show notes or at patron.podbean.com/directionallycorrect. Thanks for your support.